Okay, everyone, it's 6 o'clock. Can everybody hear me okay? Great, so let's bring this meeting to order. Welcome to City Council work session for Monday, June 21st, 2021. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
I
allegiance
pledge
allegiance to the flag
of the United
States of America
America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let's move on to roll call, please.
Councilman Scaringi,
Present.
Councilwoman Riley,
Present.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Present.
Councilman Burns,
Present.
Councilman Strong,
Present.
Councilman Scanlon,
Present.
President Rosinetti.
Present.
Okay, that's 7 here.
Great, thank you. So first up, we have Chris today from Code Enforcement. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here with us. I know it's a busy time for you folks, for sure. And we've been hearing a whole lot from constituents, and we thought it was a good idea to have you here with us tonight to just tell us about what's going on in your code enforcement world, and also give an opportunity to folks to ask any questions that they might have personally, or questions that have come up through interactions with their constituents.
Well, thanks, Sophia. It is a busy time of year. We've had some pent-up demand for new construction projects due to the pandemic. It's finally getting back into full swing, and being that it's summertime, that coincides with our busiest time of year. So we certainly have, on the building construction side, quite a bit of work going on, a lot of interesting, nice new projects in the works, and a lot of requests for inspections and plan review and things that keep the building department very busy. The code department really is not seasonal. When we talk about property maintenance for existing properties, we have as much in the wintertime as we have in the summer. So that is the problems change from snow and ice accumulation and heating problems to more of a exterior property maintenance, and the full gamut of interior violations that affect people's livelihoods, quality of life, ranging, from plumbing and electrical to just property maintenance. So that's always a busy season. There is no busy season for the code guys. They are busy year round, and summer's no exception. So there's a lot going on. As always, we have some bad actors who are not committed to the vision that we all share, which is to keep Binghamton safe and harmonious and looking good. And it's always a struggle dealing with those individuals. But the courts are opening up a little bit more than they have been before. We're still dealing with an eviction moratorium. So bad actors can be sometimes tenants, and the landlord's inability to part ways and terminate leases certainly impacts their ability to help us bring properties into compliance. So we're about halfway back to normal with regards to all the tools and resources available to us, and having the tenants and landlords have the tools and resources that they normally rely on available to them.
Sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. Does anyone have any specific questions for Chris?
Sophia, I do. Yes.
Go. I saw two hands. I saw Councilman Burns. You go first. I think you're up first.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to be here.
My pleasure.
I have one property. I just bother everybody with one, but that one on Indiana, where it's a junkyard up there. It's been going on for almost a year now, and I was up there yesterday, and it's worse. It's gotten worse and not better. Just wondering about why it takes. For the rest of you, this literally is, the guy's got, it's just junk, old cars, junk toilets, you name it, he's got it out there. And it's a beautiful neighborhood, except for that. So what takes so long for something like that? I mean, it's just so egregious. Why don't we just load it into a truck and let them sue us? You know, I mean, it's just awful. So
We've actually been addressing that all throughout the winter, and that has been brought to the courts and court ordered to be brought into compliance, which it was. Unfortunately, it was a very short-lived term of compliance. The individual who rents that house, I can't explain what business he's in or what compels him to bring that amount of disregarded refuse to his property, but Councilman Burns, that was a property that was addressed early on this year and for a very short time brought into compliance. And it was only a matter of time before he brought it back to the state that it was in when we first observed it. So we have a new notice of violation now. He's given another opportunity to cure. And when he doesn't, the tools that we have available range from Public Works going and removing the items and billing the property owner, not necessarily the tenant, but the property owner for the cost of removing the items, or bringing the occupant back into court, perhaps even bringing to the attention of the courts that he's in violation of his conditional discharge, which was a promise to not get another ticket for at least 6 months. So the second line will be more severe than the first.
Okay.
It's
So so a tenant or an owner just can't take care of the situation, pay the fine, whatever it is, and then start from scratch. So it will be getting worse.
For him, it will be getting worse
Yeah.
in terms of
Good.
penalty for using the court's time and resources to bring justice for.
Right.
It would be nice if we could just tell him this is not in compliance with the code, and he would agree to that and bring it into compliance without any further prodding. Unfortunately, some people don't necessarily see it as a violation the way that we do, and they want to make their argument in front of a judge to make sure that they were given the opportunity to refute our claim.
Right. Okay, then I hate to take up all the time, but lawns in general. We got 2 lawns here on the south side, one of them on Vestal Avenue. One last year by Weiss literally took all summer to get cut. So if a property is abandoned by the owner, by the bank, or whoever it is, and we can see clearly that it's abandoned, and I know we give them a notice, why don't we, I don't know how long they get to, they get a certain amount of time to respond, and if they don't respond, it goes to Parks Department, and then they put it on their list of things to do. But it's too bad we couldn't put it on the top of their list the day that the code violation goes in, rather than get on your list and their list. So if, in a situation like that, why don't we just cut the lawn and then send the guy the bill, send the person the bill, and then, why does it take so long?
I wish I had a quick answer for that. The time that we allow to cure a problem like high grass is 24 hours from the time the owner receives the notice. So we have to include in that the amount of time it takes to deliver. If they're local, we allow 2 days. If they're out of town, we allow 5. So for somebody who's out of town, that's 5 days plus 24 hours to cure the violation. If it's not done, we do create a work order request and deliver it to the Parks Department. And I don't want to speak on behalf of the Parks Department, but it's my understanding that their contract with the private company that cuts grass for the city of Binghamton is not working out so well. And they're allocating so many of the resources to tracking that company and making sure that the city's not being billed for work that was never done, that we don't have the same amount of resources to allocate to us for problem properties. So the Parks Department is struggling through that right now. They are responding to our requests, not as timely as they have in the past, but I think it's just a hiccup in the system that's going to work itself out. And they have a wonderful director. The assistant director is very cognizant of this situation, and they're doing everything they can to get things back on the fast track so that we can cut and bill and stay on top of these things before they become health and sanitation hazards, not to mention potential fire hazard.
Mhm. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Welcome.
And Councilman, just to briefly, we have to follow the process, and I know that it takes too long, but otherwise we're trespassing.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Scanlon, you're next.
Yeah. Chris, thanks for coming down. I have two different part questions. So I have a repeat offender on Mueller Street. I think you probably know the address, and he has junk in the front yard, and I go and see him, knock on his door, and sometimes he moves the junk to his backyard, but sure enough, it finds its way back to the front yard. I know the code department has written him up multiple times over the past, 5 years I've been in city council. So my question for you, is there something in the code that is addressed as repeat offenders, or as just an ongoing process that your hands are tied as far as code, as far as repeat offenders?
As far as repeat offenders having the right to receive notice from the code department that they have a violation, there's no limit on how many times we can ask them to cure a deficiency. If that individual fails to make remedies and it results in a court appearance ticket, that's when we start tracking the number of times that they've been not just charged, but convicted. And a conviction isn't necessarily a monetary fine, just an admission of guilt with even a conditional discharge. If the judge feels like being lenient and saying, I won't fine you this time as long as you fix the problem, but I will give you a conditional discharge, letting you know that you cannot get another ticket in the next 6 months, or you will be facing charges on your new ticket, plus the one that we're discussing today. So a conditional discharge, an admit of guilt, or a finding of guilt in a trial is conviction. And it's currently on the books right now in the code that 3 convictions in a 5-year period carries a minimum fine of $1,000. The judge at that point is free to deviate from that recommendation, but it's unlawful for Assistant Corporation Counsel to recommend less than a $1,000 fine. So what we're faced with now is whether or not we issue a ticket and actually try to seek that conviction, or because the courts can be backed up and the appearance for an individual like that might be 6 or 8 weeks, maybe it would be more prudent to have the Parks Department cut the grass, or have DPW remove the trash and produce a bill to the property owner. So for quick resolution, to eliminate a health hazard, we go with DPW removing the trash. That, however, circumvents the conviction. So that individual might have caused DPW to appear at the property numerous times over a 5-year period, but that's not necessarily tracked with a progressive fine schedule like we would find if somebody were to go to court. So that's just our perceived notion from the community, that they would rather see quick response and quick results than the long, lengthy process that could end up with a more severe penalty, but doesn't necessarily cure the problem in a way that would preserve the integrity of the neighborhood.
Thank you for that, Chris. One more quick question. So I know your hands are tied as far as code, you can't walk down somebody's driveway to look in their backyard. Am I saying that correct as a code person?
That's true for 1 and 2 family homes. There's a section of the code that allows us to approach the back door of a property on 3 family or more, being that sometimes a building will be partitioned in a way that it will have a 1st floor front apartment and a 1st floor back apartment. And to be able to provide service to the person on the 1st floor rear, we are allowed to go down the driveway. But for a 1 and 2 family home, if there's a complaint, we always ask the complainant if it would be possible to observe the violation from their property. You could still look at it from the complainant's property without violating that right to privacy.
Let me ask you one more follow-up to that then. when you write up, so let's assume, and this is exactly the case I'm talking about, where a neighbor, an adjoining neighbor will allow you to go on their property, then you're taking pictures of their property. Is that, or does it, the complainant's name, does that come in a report that this homeowner would see?
No, we don't ever publish that information in a report. We don't bring it up in the courtroom. Seldom do they actually give us their names. So even if somebody were to access information to our database through the Freedom of Information Act, we don't store that information in there. So it would not be possible for the defendant to do a FOIL request to see who made the complaint. 9 times out of 10, people tell us, I want to remain anonymous and I'm not going to give you my name. And so we don't record that person's name so that it could never be discovered at a later date, which is their right. They're well within their rights to make anonymous complaints as much as they want.
Thank you, Chris.
Councilwoman Freeman?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming to our meeting. I know code has been kind of a hot topic lately. It's been coming up a lot at our meetings. And so I don't know if this would be the best forum to discuss something like this, but I was wondering if I could maybe suggest or request that in order to potentially alleviate the frustration that residents feel from repeat offenders, not only just frustrations in the aesthetic, appearance of adjacent properties, but also the safety concerns that come up with, housing, and indoor, inspections and violations and things like that. I was wondering if we could maybe try and see if we couldn't come up with a way that falls within the confines of New York state law, of course, but a way that could incentivize landlords to address their properties in a way that isn't just avoiding a punitive ticket or court appearance. For example, I have read a little bit about in Minneapolis, actually, they have a tiering system. So the more often if a property has to be cited more often, they get bumped down to a lower tier, and then the code has to come out and inspect the property more often, versus a property who does not obtain citations as often. They would be bumped up to a higher tier and code would not come as often. And I know, that's just kind of very basically what that system looks like. And that's just one example, but I wonder if we could have some kind of discussion or focus group or something to come up with a way that that incentivizes landlords to take care of their property rather than just the avoidance of a ticket, because that does not seem to be enough of a deterrent for some people to maintain their properties.
I would be happy to have a discussion with you or any of the council members about different ideas that you might have. I think we've talked about it maybe one-on-one with some of you over the years, and I think that we've always maintained the notion that you're right. You can't penalize somebody into having accurate, correct behavior or well-maintained properties. I mean, at the root of it, this is all based on market forces and rational decision making, and somebody's choice to neglect or deficiency or allow something to exist isn't necessarily them thumbing their nose at the city or even just trying to fly under the radar and avoid a fine. They're really probably facing real decisions on revenue versus expenses. And we've heard that time and time again through the Safe Housing Task Force from the property management community and the property owners, that a lot of times deficiencies that they would love to correct just aren't aren't possible. There's no way to recapture the investment, but it would put them in the red to the extent that they would lose the property. Minor violations aside, I think there are some big improvements that need to be made in a lot of properties. And I think that the landlords are holding off because it's just not economically feasible. So you're right. I don't think punishing somebody or telling them what they're already aware of and would love to fix, but just can't afford to is going to make it any easier for them to make that decision. It's just going to increase the amount of discomfort they feel at putting off something that they know needs to be addressed. So I more frequent notification of those conditions might be helpful for somebody who's not aware, but for those who are, there might be some other solution that we could come up with. I doubt that we could nail that down in the next few minutes. So maybe in another meeting, off camera and in person, or however, another Zoom meeting even, and not in a work session would give us the opportunity to kind of bat some ideas around.
Right, definitely. And there is not going to be a simple solution, because if there were a simple solution, we would have implemented it already. So of course, it's complicated. There's lots of forces at play. But I'm just happy. This seems like the start of those kinds of discussions, that maybe we can implement something that will be sustainable in the future. And I'm happy to send information about that specific example that I had heard of. I can send that to you and also to everyone on council and Corp Council too, just as an example of what another city has been doing.
That sounds great. I welcome the information.
Okay, thanks.
Councilman Strawn.
Hey, hi, Chris. Thanks for coming. Thank you for your patience with my various emails over the last year or so. I don't want to get into specific properties necessarily, but I guess the twofold question is, first, to piggyback on what Councilman Friedman just said, maybe in just a more of a direct, is there anything right now that you deal with that we might be able to do with the mayor's office and corporate council to any kind of a code issue or any kind of a legislative action, increasing the fee schedules? To me, that $1,000 over a 3 to 5 year period, I would definitely be in favor of the quick. But it seems to me, I don't want to be ridiculous. There's a small lawn and we're going to charge $500 to cut it. But is there something, because some of these properties, I agree, it might not be economically feasible, but some of them, like the couple that I'm dealing with, a few charges added to their property taxes might push it over the edge of properties that are so bad that they really need to be torn down. And something to push it over the edge. I hate to push something over the edge and get it away from the owners, but some of the properties over on this side, that needs to happen, quite frankly. And they don't pay their water bill. They don't pay this. They don't pay that. Anything that gets added to the property taxes eventually is going to cost them the property. And somebody else can get it that can actually take care of it. Or in the worst case scenario, the city can maybe get ownership of it and tear it down. So I don't know if there's, that's kind of a twofold question, but that's what I would.
No, and I think that, you bring up some good points, is I think a lot of people realize that they're on the downward decline and that it's only a matter of time before they stop receiving income. And I think in some cases, landlords are quite surprised themselves at how long they continue to receive rents for something that even they knew was beyond the point of return. And the code does, through its mechanisms, expedite that process. There are probably owners out there that will say, I'll keep taking rent as long as they give it to me. I can't believe it's happening, but it is. And a condemnation or a finding of unfit for habitation, or an excessive amount of bills presented for work done by Public Works or Parks would expedite the process and accelerate the inevitable, which is, the decline in the loss of the property. As far as ownership, the city would only obtain ownership of a property by getting it from the county. The county performs tax foreclosures. They take about 3 years of non-payment before they initiate the process. So that takes a little while. But we do, in fact, probably gain more of an impact on these properties by presenting bills for trash cleanup, removal of snow and ice, and lawn cutting than we do through the courts. So a typical bill for removing trash is $355, whereas the highest fine that you can get for illegal dumping or littering is $150. So by sending Parks over there or DPW to remediate the problem immediately, you see immediate results. You get a bill that's much more severe than any fine that they're going to get from the courts. And when the fines aren't paid, in theory, they do go on to their tax bill, which would accelerate their inability to keep up with those payments and perhaps result in a property foreclosure by Broome County. So by expediting, I might mean that, within 1, 2, or 3 years, we'll see the end to that property, as opposed to somebody who might continue to collect rents for 6 or 7 years if gone unchecked.
Right.
So we do the best we can, and sometimes in our efforts to keep things safe, sanitary, and maintain the integrity of the neighborhood, we accelerate this path to the end of the property being an occupied property. And of course, without revenue, it's only a matter of time before it becomes a foreclosed on property.
Right.
There are lengthy times though, but it's not because anybody at the treasurer's office or the code office or anywhere else wants to give them the benefit of the doubt beyond what we think is reasonable, but the processes are established either by the state or by the Constitution that everybody has these rights. And you hear it every week in court when the judge says, I'm going to reserve all your rights to you. You have the opportunity to do, ABC, because there's not a judge out there that would strip somebody of their rights. And that is just.
Right, of course. We don't want to just take the property,
but I know what you mean. And I think there's been plenty of occasions where a condemnation has accelerated the inevitable. We see a property in decline. We know it's only a matter of time before that landlord walks away from it, and us taking the income away and then having a lot of expenses charged against that property for cleaning it up or cutting the grass really accelerates that process from, I'm thinking that I might not be able to do this for much longer, to I just can't go another month at this rate.
Does anyone
Madam
else have any questions or comments?
Madam President?
Yes, Councilman Swearingen.
Thank you. Hey, Chris, how are you? Thanks for coming down this evening.
Thank you, Councilman Scarinci.
Gio's fine. I don't want to be too duplicative because a lot of my fellow council members have asked some similar questions that I have, but one that has really been plaguing me is, and I'm sure my fellow council members will probably understand what I'm talking about as soon as I'm saying this. We get constituent phone calls or emails regarding property X, and it is a property that is a repeat offender, and chances probably are you and your office know about it already. But in many conversations that I've had, whether it's City Hall staff or, some of the code enforcement officers, I feel like this body sometimes feels like its hands are bound with respect to what is it that we can do. So my question is, what I often hear is that citation X that was given to property Y cannot be altered or amended in any way because it's a state level regulation. And essentially what the code enforcement department is simply doing is enforcing a state mandate that we cannot amend. So my question is, can you or your office provide us with an exhaustive list of what is it that we can impact on the legislative side versus what we cannot? All right. So a simple example might be property X, and I'm sure some of my fellow council members have experienced this. property X, their grass is really tall. But because the grass is 8 inches tall and not 10 inches tall, it will be fined, presumably, but it can't be fined yet because the grass still needs to grow another 1.5 inches. So my question is, and again, this is just a hypothetical, if the minimum length of height of grass to be fined is 10 inches, is that something that someone in Albany thought of? Or is that something that we can amend to 6 inches or 7 inches or 5? I don't know, something like that.
Yeah,
That's really.
I'd be happy to answer that for you. I can send everybody a copy of the Property Maintenance Code of New York State. It's the smallest, thinnest book of the 8 books that we receive from the Department of State. It deals specifically with property maintenance of existing buildings, and that's what the code department does, as opposed to the building construction department enforces the other 7 books, which are like dictionaries or phone books. So it'd be very easy for me to send that document to you. You'll see that most of the codes in the city of Binghamton mirror the New York State code. On occasion, we did deviate from it and cause the local code to be more restrictive, which is any municipality's right to do with approval from the state. So if the state says you are allowed to have no more than 1 unregistered, unlicensed vehicle on your property, they're giving everybody permission to have 1. In the city of Binghamton, we said that's too many. We're going to have none. You are not allowed to have any unlicensed vehicles on your property that are not fully enclosed in the garage. So we made a more restrictive law. I can't tell you when that was made. I can't even tell you if it received approval from the state, but it's been on the books for the 14 years that I've been there. So I'm under the impression that since it's not been challenged by the state, that whoever drafted that legislation did take it to the state and get approval. The same goes for grass. If 10 inches seems excessive, we can make that 8 inches. We just have to draft legislation, send it to the state, gain approval from them to be more restrictive than the state. We cannot be less restrictive than the state. If the state says 10 inches, we cannot say we like 14. There's
Right.
probably some analysis that goes into drafting these. This is now the 4th revision of the code that I've seen in 14 years. So that gets reviewed in its entirety, and new codes updates are introduced every 3 years. It's always been 10 inches. So I think if anybody were to make the argument that that was excessive, or if that was too lenient, that may have come up by now. So when the state says 10, I'm under the impression they gave that an appropriate amount of review and analysis to come up with 10. Doesn't stop us from saying 8. We can say 8 if we want to, with 2 parts: state approval and city council approval to draft that legislation into our code of ordinance. Other things like trash and garbage are hard to quantify, and we've been challenged on that over and over. How much is too much? And in our mind, any is too much. We have people who have 1 bag out there and they get really upset that we came all the way over to their property to remove 1 bag of garbage. But if you've lived next door, if you've seen 1 bag that's contains food items that's been left for weeks in the sun and the skunks ripped it open and it's all over the place, 1 bag is too many. So I don't know if we can put a quantitative amount on garbage or if we can define that any more clearly. But we certainly do have the right as a municipality to request more restrictive code, which I think we've done in the past with a couple items. So I will make sure that everybody gets a copy of the New York State Code. You're going to see that it's very, very similar to the city code. If you hold them up side by side, they're almost identical with the exception of a couple of things like 0 cars allowed in the city of Binghamton. We have always, maintained in the city of Binghamton that windows need to have screens in it to prevent, insect infestation. This was the first year that I've seen the state incorporate that into their code. So they're catching up with us in that sense. But we do have, multiple calls, and I'll shift a little bit here. We do get multiple calls on the same property. And, you know, I hate to defer this to an abstract notion, but I'm a firm believer that these are truly market forces in place. And the reason I say that, Joe, is because in my time that I've been there, there were times when I said, if this one tenant just moved on, or this one landlord just sold this property to somebody else, things would be so much better. And the problem that we see is that regardless of who occupies the tenant space or who owns the property, a problem property continues to be a problem property. And I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason other than the fact that it's probably in a condition that attracts somebody who's not able to pay top dollar. The landlord knows they're not getting top dollar for the apartment. You get somebody who's maybe a little less aware of maintenance standards that are shared by their peers, and a landlord who's willing to work with that. And we just see the same thing over and over. There's a property on the south side in John's district that I just talked to the neighbor today, and I said, I understand your frustration, but you have to realize this has happened at this property. The frequency of calls has existed through probably dozens of different tenants and 4 different owners. And none of these owners know each other. They don't share the same business model, but we do have the same market forces in place. We have a demand for subpar, low cost housing, and we have the supply. The landlord says, I could buy this from the previous owner and fix it up, but the numbers just don't make sense. And here's somebody who's willing to rent it as is today. And there'll probably be a problem, and they'll probably leave their trash out back, and they won't take it to the curb, and they won't buy blue bags, and they'll break windows, and things will go wrong inside, but the numbers work. So I don't know that more restrictive codes is going to eliminate the demand for that type of housing or the supply of it. I think the best we can do is just to make sure that we're aware of any hazardous conditions as much as we can be, and do not let those hazardous conditions exist without bringing it to the attention of the responsible parties. In the end, that's what our role is to make sure that hazardous conditions or unsafe conditions are acknowledged and not just gone unmentioned and unseen. And that does result in repeat offenders and repeat violations of the same property, but in many instances it's for different tenants and it's under different ownership. So we're not really getting the message to anybody. It's not like one family and one landlord has heard from us 45 times. In the case of the Southside apartment, it was probably a couple dozen different tenants and 4 different landlords who heard from us, 4 dozen times. So I don't know if the impact is really appreciated. We see it more than they do.
I don't deny for 5 seconds that there are market forces that are related to the behaviors that we observe. I definitely would say, notwithstanding proportionality, I think it depends on the type of behavior in question. While I do agree with you, I think that's a broader sentiment that might not necessarily correlate all the way through with every possible example. But it doesn't take away from the point that you're making. The last question I had was, and thank you for sending that over to us. I appreciate that. The last question I had was, if you have property X that has an inordinate amount of garbage or a couch or something on their front porch that potentially could protrude or impact the safety of, say, one of our firefighters if they get called to that property, do we currently have any sort of code violations with regard to that?
Absolutely. The way the code is structured right now, when we cite somebody It's a very broad code and it covers a lot of things. And the way it reads is that the property owner is responsible for maintaining the exterior property in a clean, safe, and sanitary condition. So when somebody says, well, it's just a couch, it's not dirty, it's not insanitary, we argue, but your property is unsafe. And whether it's for emergency service personnel or the occupants or their guests or invitees, or even somebody who's trespassing, as much as you may not like to think that you're responsible for somebody who's violating your rights, you are. And even if somebody's trespassing on your property, they have the right to safety. And so when we cite them and they make the argument that it is clean and it is sanitary, we can always say, but it's unsafe. And whether you intended, whether your occupants know better than to, walk that way or past that object is irrelevant, because anybody who's not familiar with the property, whether it's emergency services, a NYSEG worker, USPS workers, that those are people who also need to be kept safe, and unsafe conditions are a violation of the code. So a lot of times that's how that comes up, that it's not necessarily a health and sanitation issue, but it is a safety issue.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your time, Chris. And after getting that that New York State code pamphlet that you were talking about, and I get a chance to read through it, if you'd be open to maybe having some future discussions down the road, I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Riley, I
Madam
think I
President.
saw you. You're welcome. I think I saw you raise your hand a
Thank you,
couple times.
President Rezanetti. Thank you. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Yes. For sake of time, we talked quite a bit. I think it's a year since we had our town hall, to the date almost. And rental registration, some things that have happened in local municipalities to strengthen the accountability of our landlords has been discussed several times. And so I just want to stick another pin in that, particularly as we talk about zoning and how houses are being repurposed for multiple family, we would call living, but the onus is upon the city to determine that these renters are not living as one family, which causes a lot of problems in various areas. So I'm going to put a pin in it, because definitely we do need to have a longer discussion to talk about all of these issues that were brought forth. And once, like Councilman Scaringi said, once I review the New York State and continue to look at the success of other local cities, we can have that discussion and talk about what has happened since some legislation moved forward way back to support such initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Yeah, I think that this is, we could go on all night, and we probably should maybe not do that tonight, but you're all welcome to contact me individually or in small groups or as a large group at a time that's, dedicated just to code enforcement and some ideas that you've had and examples you've seen in other municipalities. And we could really talk more about this. And I realize there's other people on the agenda tonight who wanted to, discuss their issues too. So we will definitely put a pin in it, but let's certainly continue the conversation. And you're all welcome to call the office at any time. It's always possible for us to set up a time to have discussions, or even just toss some emails back and forth to bat some ideas around and see what's out there, what's being done, and what your ideas are. I have a couple ideas myself. I'm working with Corp Council on a piece of legislation that deals more with the construction side of things, but I think it's meaningful and important and will have a significant impact on the city and the way that it's developed. And certainly that's, in the long run, how some of these properties come into being. And if we address it early on in the process, we might not end up with some of the situations that we see in all different council districts. So definitely a work in progress, and something that we never stop working on. And we're always open to different ideas. Be happy to discuss them with any of you at any time.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate your time.
A pleasure.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on to Mr. Paddock. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Tell us about RL 21-114.
Okay. Okay. RL 21 dash 114, actually, I have two of them. The first one is to amend the 2021 DPW budget to fund additional repairs for our vehicles. We had a strong winter, as most of you know, and obviously around the clock we were repairing plows. Then obviously we did conversions to our equipment now to get us in the milling and paving seasons. And beginning on May 15th, I started overhauling all our plows in preparation for this year's snow. So again, we've been hit hard on both the parts and repairs. So I'd like to transfer money from our temp services line to our vehicle parts and our vehicle repairs so that I can continue the process with current repairs that are necessary, as well as part of my preventive maintenance plan and snow removal to being ready to go here for November 1st.
Does anyone have any questions? Councilwoman Riley?
Sorry about that. I do kind of have a question. How are you, John?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good. Some time ago, you were before us saying that one of the large mowers needed to be replaced. Was that you? Maybe no.
Yep. Parks and Rec, they
Okay.
predominantly handle the mowers and those type of activities, so they do the mowing.
Perfect. Okay, I'll save that question for another time. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. If
Okay.
there's no other question, I have one more too.
Yes, I see it. 118, go ahead.
It's 118 is to amend the 2021 DPW budget to increase money for personal line. We have a supervisor who's done a great job for us, has decided to retire. His name is Dan Merkel. Dan's leaving the city of Binghamton on July 8th. It's probably one of the most key positions within DPW. It handles all our signals, lighting, signage, and obviously we don't encumber funds. So what I'd like to get is to transfer money from our contingency line to our personal services so we can bring one of the individuals on board and begin this operation on July 12th. And he's work along with Danny so we won't miss a beat. It's just a really important position.
Questions? Okay. Thank you,
Thank
John.
you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Moving on to Mr. Lake. Hi, how are you?
Good evening. How are you?
Doing okay. Good to see you. Go ahead and tell us about RL 116.
Okay. I would like a resolution authorizing the mayor to appoint a new New York State DOT Equitable Business Opportunities System point of contact. And with some of the projects we have with DOT, it requires input into their system. And before me, it was Ray Standish. But I do not intend to be here after the end of the year. And I thought it would give some continuity if you appointed my assistant to that, would allow the mayor to appoint him to it. So then he would be able to go forward with it.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Megan, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. Thank you.
Good. Go ahead. What do you have here for us?
So RL 21-115. This is the backpack and school supply program we do every year. We've done since 2017 with CARES. This is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with CARES for funding for that program.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Hey, Megan, congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Graham, you're up next.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. How are you?
Good. This RL 21-112 is to authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Binghamton Police Athletic League, the PAL camp, for use of fiscal year 46 CDBG capital monies. This was a program, a partnership with the United Way of Broome County. We're able to leverage $20,000 in funding from the United Way through their grant program. Our money will be used to fix the roof. It's going to only pay for a portion of it up at the PAL camp in the town of Kirkwood. As many of you know, PAL Camp's a nonprofit that's been operated by current or retired members of law enforcement for about, I think it's almost 75 years since the 1940s. So it's a free summer camp for kids 7 through 13. This roof repair is absolutely necessary for them to continue their programming, and being able to partner with United Way to split the cost was a win-win for the city. So this is to facilitate that new roof development.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you, Council President Rezanetti. Hello, Mr. Cram. How are you?
Good.
Good, good. So now you say, I've been looking, I've heard a lot about the PALS camp, and I tried to go out to the facility. When I Googled it, I came up with a downtown address. Do you have the Kirkwood address?
Yeah, it's on Strat Mill Road in Kirkwood.
Okay.
I can pull it up here. 536 Strat Mill Road, perhaps.
Okay. Now, who owns this building?
The nonprofit, the PAL Camp, Police Athletic League.
Binghamton PAL Camp nonprofit. So it's not under Binghamton's ownership?
It is not a city facility, no.
Okay. That helps. Thank you. Now, CDBG funding can be used for properties outside of the city of Binghamton?
If the property, from what I've been told, if the property is serving city residents, then yes. And this is a service that serves city residents. So in the past, we've done some work with Achieve, if you recall. They have locations outside of the city of Binghamton as well.
But Achieve is located in Binghamton, right?
They have multiple locations, but the money was going towards a program that was, I believe, in the village of Johnson City.
I see Steve came on. Steve is going to give us some clarification. Thank you.
Necessary.
So,
If necessary.
yeah, go ahead.
No, it's, yeah, the CDBG funds can really be used anywhere. There's no federal requirement they have to be spent with the municipality that is using them. However, it does make sense that the city would use them for city-based services or for city clients. And so from our regards to that, the PAL Center would qualify because it's being used by City of Binghamton youth to qualify for the program to go up there. So physical activities there are fine.
Okay. And so the camp is indoors?
It's an indoor, outdoor facility. There's many acres of walking trails, a lake, and then there's an indoor facility with a kitchen, game room, et cetera, basically event or assembly space as well.
Okay. And so the Police Athletic League of Binghamton owns the property, and we're supporting the support of the roof because of the camp. Is that's correct?
That's correct. Yes, us and the United Way.
Thank you. That concludes my question.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Jared.
So, President Rezanetti?
I'm sorry, is it Tom? Go ahead. Councilman Scanlon.
I think I mentioned before on here, I went to PAL Camp 50 plus years ago. I remember I have great memories of these, current police officers and retired police officers teaching us everything from how to shoot a bow and arrow to hiking to and everything in between. And I have great memories of that, and it's supporting the city kids. So I'm 100% behind this thing. Thank you, President Rezanetti.
Yep. It's a great program. I know a lot of kids over the years who have gone to that camp. I agree with you, Councilman Scanlon. Okay, anyone else? Thank you. Jared, we're going to move on to Mr. Frank. Hi.
Hi, everybody. Actually, I let everybody know today, I'm going to withdraw this for the moment. The reason it was requested to be expedited is because we had extended an offer to somebody. They did not accept that offer. A lot of the reason has to do with the salaries. So I will be working on this. I do expect to come back with something perhaps at the next meeting and perhaps ask to expedite it. But for tonight, I'm just going to withdraw it.
Okay, thank you. Steve Carson and Jared Cram
Ms.
again.
Riley had her.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Councilman Riley.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, President Rezanetti. Ken, can you give us a market analysis of comparator cities and their corp council? No?
Well, I can, but I'll give you an example. I know that somebody said an assistant attorney in Ithaca with 3 years experience makes about the same as our first assistant corporation counsel who's been here for 21 years.
Okay.
So we're not competitive.
Okay.
We're not close to being competitive. I'm just trying to get us back to at least where we were 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. But if you can send us like just some more than one city, and then we can kind of understand.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carson, Mr. Cram, you're back on.
Yeah, these are
RL 117, right?
Yep. These are a pair of RLs as it has to deal with both the city's second round of CARES COVID relief funding, and then the fiscal year 47 annual action plan, which while is adopted or included, I should say, in the 2022 budget, the process for HUD starts much earlier in the year. This was a process we did last year and do every year. Regarding RL 21-117, this is to allocate the second funding that we received from CARES Act. You recall in the first amount, we had spent some money on nonprofit assistance, mortgage assistance, rental assistance for individuals. We are mirroring that program as well. And so with about $594,000, it's to accept that money in CARES Act and fund expenses in rental assistance, mortgage assistance, nonprofit assistance. There's also a carve out for other program assistance, which will support programs in affordable housing, as well as marketing for the 211 program. If anyone comes across an individual who's asking questions about maybe they were experiencing homelessness, maybe they're about to lose their housing situation, has general questions about how they can get assistance with sort of COVID and as we're getting out of it, or just in general, we should be encouraging people to call 211. It is the single point of entry for the coordinated care process. But we've also heard from people that they don't know that 211 is available or are not aware of the resources. So all of those additional programs that will be with the program expense will have to come to City Council. Steve confirmed this as separate RLs, but we have that carved out, knowing that we're going to have costs associated with other programs besides the three that have been set up by City Council. And also this round, we do not include any administrative costs, which we had done for the previous round. So that is sort of phase one. Certainly, I think everyone's familiar with the nonprofit assistance program, which we've been bringing down RLs for different agencies that have received hardships due to COVID. The mortgage assistance, again, as we continue to see, as we creep towards either the eviction moratorium being lifted, or as we creep towards, more people having struggled to pay their mortgage, we can assist them in that manner. And then with the rental assistance, which has been sort of the lion's share of the money that's gone out the door. And we expect that the need to even be bigger when the eviction moratorium lifts. That is our partnership with the Family Enrichment Network to provide rental assistance to keep people from being homeless. We still have monies that are available from the first round, which we allocated a big chunk of that first round CARES Act funding. As we encourage more people to call 211, as we encourage more residents who may be affected to get connected with caseworkers and with housing officers, we expect that those monies to dwindle and get them out in the community. There is still going to be a rush for these funds in the next several months. So we want to be prepared, and this allocates the round 2 of the CARES Act.
Any questions? Councilman Burns.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. With the money that the federal government gave to the state, which just now 211 is helping to allocate, I think there's like $26 million to help renters and to help landlords, and they both have to be on the same page and getting the help. Are we making sure that we're using up that money before we are using up our money? So if they call 211, do they send them first to the state money before they come to the city for our money? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, Steve, can you talk a little bit about the coordinated entry model?
Sure.
That's a great question.
So there is a lot of money kind of jumping around to handle rental assistance. So understand the state money, from what I understand, has been allocated to the county. And so the county's got its own issues, which includes Binghamton. And there is money that has gone to the town of Union, so that includes Endicott, Johnson City, and Endwell. So from 211's perspective, they're going to use in money that's restrictive to the most restrictive area. So they would not jump to the state money to cover a Binghamton person if the Binghamton already has rental assistance for someone in Binghamton. They'll jump to the state money for someone out in Windsor or someone, outside of the city. And the same thing for Town of Union. They're going to jump to the Town of Union's money first before using that state money. That's part of the coordinated entry, is just to figure out which money to utilize first and foremost, which agencies to jump to. So that's that situation with how coordinated entry assigns funding to agencies. But my understanding is the state program's been having some issues anyway. We're at least ready to go on this, and we're trying to get ready to go for when the moratorium ends. Every single one of you is going to get about 1 million calls. So be prepared for that. It's going to be very difficult. So we're getting ahead of this. We're getting money into the right places for when the moratorium actually ends, so that we can jump into helping people right away. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Steve and Jared. Let's move on to, we did that one. Chuck, Mr. Shaker, are you here?
President Resonetti, we had another, I don't know if that was the
We
same.
covered
There was no questions on either one of them, or?
One was 47 and one was COVID round 2. They were separate RLs.
I just want to make sure that we were, okay.
What was the number for that? There's 117, right?
21-121 and 21-117. I know I kind of talked about both in the beginning, so I just wanted to confirm, but.
121, I don't know why I see that. I don't see that. But okay, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's move on to Chuck. Are you here?
Hi, Sophia, I am. Did
How are
John
you?
Paddock do both of his?
Yes, he did.
Okay. My RL is to move money out of the American Rescue Plan Act Fund for our lost revenue for last year. I sent you the calculation. It's $6,224,025. Basically, the original RL I brought down to you was bringing down, let's say it was $23 million 2 weeks ago, and putting that into a restricted fund balance. I'm taking it out of the restricted fund balance and put it into just a regular fund balance to be used however the city approves. I will say this, I followed the guidelines here to come up with this $6.2 million. I'm reaching out to different people just to verify that I have everything properly correct. And if it changes, I will let you know. Hopefully it does not, but this legislation is not perfectly written. I can tell you that. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Chuck? Councilwoman Riley?
Yes, thank you, Council President Resonetti. Hi, Mr. Shager, how are you?
Good, good.
Good, good. Can you remind me what our budgeted 2020 revenue, what did we budget for?
2020 revenue. Gosh, I'm not in the office right now, but it was probably,
Well, you can hold and send that when you get back to the office, because we did
Okay.
account for losses at that time too, right? There was some adjustment.
our
We projected.
Our 2020 actual revenue. Is that what you're saying?
No, I have the actual here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes.
Well,
So the budgeted revenue is what
Okay.
I was asking for. And then the actual revenue is what I would like to see as well.
Okay,
If I
well,
can
this
compare.
62, this 62 million is not the total ending number because there's things that had to be taken out of it. Like this number includes stuff from the ramps, from the refuse fund, from the insurance fund, but it doesn't include anything from water or sewer or capital. And it removes federal money that came in. Okay, but I know what you're asking for, and I'll put the budgeted numbers down here for you of what I have here, so you would see that. I think that's what you're looking for.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
And how it impacted the fund balance overall, because we have been moving funds in and out, correct?
Right. Last year, our total fund balance dropped about $1 million. I don't have that right in front of me. I sent you the AUD back in the end of May, and the general fund dropped by $1 million. The ramps dropped by almost $500,000. The refuse fund dropped by a couple $100,000. I can't remember off the top of my head on the water and sewer, but we did save quite a bit in the general fund by cutting back on things during the year.
Which we talked about with the salaries
Yes, during the-
and our sales tax revenue, right?
Yeah, all those
Okay.
things, correct. Yeah,
Okay.
but I'll
I look-
send that to you.
That'll be great. Thank you. We'll send it to everybody. I'm sure everybody
will.
has the
I
same
will.
question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
You too. Back to Mr. Cram. Are you here?
Yes, this is an RL. Again, this is just kind of a beginning of the process, but in looking at updates to the city's ethics code, I don't believe that it's ever been really amended or looked at since it was adopted in 1970 in a material way. So, I included in there in green after some discussions with, Corporation Counsel's office about what could be prudent in terms of updates to the ethics code to bring the city in line with some of the best practices at the state level, some different advocacy that the New York State Bar Association has done, or NICOM, or a select committee that was done on it. This is, just the beginning of the language. Certainly, I know that personnel wants to be able to weigh in and take a look at it, but I think it does a couple things in terms of, I think, putting the city in a good position, not just for the city as a whole, but for the individuals who are choosing to volunteer for things like boards and commissions, and make sure that they're protected. And also, too, this isn't something that has to be certainly not expedited. I wouldn't even imagine it voted on in 2 meetings. Something that has to be eventually filed with the Department of State. And I would not think it would take effect until January 1st, mainly seeing that some of it impacts current employees. So I know that Corporation Counsel wants to give it another once over. Personnel would like to take a look at it, but the themes and intent of the reforms, again, the first comprehensive one in probably 50 years, I think are good ones and things that we've worked on.
And if I may, as an amendment to a local law, this is probably something you're going to want to do by local law and have a public hearing. So it is going to take some time.
Any questions? Councilman Burns?
I have a question. Jared, this is actually Chuck, are you still on? No.
He's on, he's just muted.
Oh. Okay. The question is, to go back to the RL previously. So we're taking 6,500,000 out of the 23 million. And the announcement.
Wait, where are we now? Wait, Councilman Burns, I'm sorry.
I'm going back one. But Jared had a press release today about the work on the streets, and I'm just wondering how. And I see that sewer and water was about 4.5 million or something like that. So I'm just wondering, is that how much money is coming out of the 23 million for that street work? Is any of that coming out for that?
I would imagine several million, but probably around 2 million.
2 million of that. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Councilman Riley.
Thank you again, Council President. So Jared, I'm glad you brought this up because we've been discussing some other items that speak to the ethics of one holding a position and or employed by the city. One such as was done by the county where we have disclosures. So this would be a great time to talk about adding some language surrounding that. So I look forward to the discussion and we will be contributing our language as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Moving on to pending legislation. What do we have?
We have 10 on the pending legislation for tonight or for Wednesday. And then we're going to have the one RL 21-117 that's expedited for Wednesday as well. Is there any questions on any of those?
Doesn't seem like there's any questions. Okay, with that, I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.